Welcome everybody to this TASS webinar on tackling the challenge of food waste in schools. If the registration numbers are anything to go by, this is a problem dear to everybody's hearts and one that every school that certainly we've ever encountered struggles with on a daily basis. And we're looking forward to hearing from three speakers who I'll introduce in a moment with very innovative solutions for tackling this problem of food waste in their schools. I want to begin. So I think we've had something like 80 registrations for this event, and we're joined today by people in schools in mainland China, in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia, in the Philippines, in Bali, in the UK, in Bahrain, in Hong Kong, and in India. So all over, certainly Asia and the Middle East. And so I'd like to begin. About half of you are already TASS members and probably familiar with what the Alliance for Sustainable Schools is all about. But for those who aren't, I'd like to just begin with a minute's introduction to who is the Alliance and what it is that we do. So we're a non-profit network of schools around the world working together to help accelerate the transition to a sustainable future. As a community of practice, the Alliance connects practitioners such as yourselves in schools to share their learning and amplify the impact of the solutions that they've worked with. And as an agent of change, we try to leverage the collective influence of our many members to engage with their students and partner with innovative organizations in their local communities to catalyze systems change in 5 focus areas: school campuses, school transport, school food, school uniforms, and education for sustainability. Our members share a commitment to the principles of the Sustainable Schools Charter, which is a document that has now been signed by more than 150 heads of school in 20 countries. Next slide, please. So as a community of practice, one of the things we love to do is provide occasions like this for the community to hear from members who have developed solutions to common sustainability challenges in schools. And food waste is certainly one of those, and a very visible one in most schools. And so today we're delighted to be joined by 3 speakers with deep practical expertise in this area to share their particular experience. 3 very different solutions, each in their own way, innovative examples of schools deploying solutions that make a real difference. And we hope you'll find inspiration from their stories and be able to apply some of what you learned today to your own context. In this way, we can help to improve how we tackle food waste in schools and magnify our collective impact. So by way of introduction, Kylie Moses, our first speaker, is a sustainability program manager at ISF Academy in Hong Kong, where she manages initiatives like food waste composting and biodiversity on campus, as well as delivering experiential learning and supporting student and teacher research projects. Our second speaker is Nick Little, who is the Education Outreach and Special Projects Manager at the Waste Lab, an impact-driven startup in Dubai that supports schools and companies with on-site and off-site composting, along with educational programs to inspire sustainable habits. And third speaker is Howard Gilmour, who teaches IB Business Management and IGCSE Economics at Dulwich College Shanghai Pudong. And Howard is one of the lead teachers on the school's Waste to Wonder project, which you'll hear about today, and which won the Students for Sustainability Award at the British Chamber's China Schools Award in 2025. So welcome to our 3 speakers and to all of you. And before I hand over to Kylie, I want to share with you 3 slides to illustrate the scale and the impact of the food waste problem and why it's so important. Some of you, no doubt, have seen this slide before. It never ceases to surprise me. And the headline, of course, is that if food waste were a country, it would be the 3rd largest emitter after China and the US. That's a staggering statistic. More than 1 billion tons of food was wasted in 2022 around the world. And that waste contributed something like 8 to 10% of all greenhouse gas emissions. That's more than 5 times the emissions from the aviation sector. Next slide. Now, if those numbers seem a little abstract for you, these photos usually help to make it real. They were taken in school canteens just seconds before the food that you see was scraped off these plates into a bin. I'm sure we've all seen it before on a daily basis in our school canteens. There are all sorts of reasons, of course, why this happens. And there are just as many ways that schools can try to reduce the amount of food waste that is, or amount of food that is wasted in this way. Project Drawdown says that reducing food waste is one of the most impactful actions that we can take to slow global warming. They actually refer to it as an emergency brake solution because it can yield rapid, tangible benefits to the climate within a few decades. But in addition to reducing food waste, it also matters a great deal how we dispose of it. And that's, of course, what we're here to talk about today. Next slide. So my third slide and final slide is an illustration of the impact of different ways of disposing of food waste. And I want to just focus your attention on 3 of these bars. The top bar is the emissions from food waste ending up in the landfill. So it's about 3 tons of CO2 equivalent emissions for every ton of food waste disposed in that way. So clearly a bit of a disaster in terms of reducing or not reducing greenhouse gas emissions. 3 tons of methane emissions, for CO2 equivalent emissions for every ton of food that's wasted. The 5th line down is labeled composting, and it shows that there's some drawdown of CO2 by enriching the soil when you compost the food waste and put it in the soil. But in addition, of course, you also avoid the methane emissions from the landfill disposal. So a net savings from composting of about 3,200 tons of emissions for every ton, 3.2 tons of emissions for every ton of food waste. And then the bottom bar represents the best case option where you don't actually waste the food in the first place when you might choose to donate it if it's not being consumed. Obviously, that's the best option. And when you do that, you not only avoid the 3 tons of landfill emissions, but you also avoid the emissions that would have arisen if you had to produce the food that you didn't waste. So the net benefit here is 9 tons or 9,000 kilograms of CO2 emissions avoided for every ton of food waste, of food that would otherwise be wasted. So that gives you a little bit of a sense of the scale and importance of the food waste problem. And we're going to be talking now about composting options and what they look like in the context of schools. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Kylie from ISF Academy in Hong Kong.
Thank you, Anthony. I'll share. Hopefully this works. Host disabled. I can't share at the moment, Michelle. Can I share my screen, please? Or are my slides on your?
No, you should be able to share.
It says disabled participant screen sharing. Still.
Okay, I will open your link on my end. Sorry about
Okay. No, that's okay. You can do that.
that.
Probably easier than me. That's why we share. On that calculation of the carbon emission equivalent emissions, I've struggled with finding anything relevant to us here in Hong Kong. A lot of the composting calculations assume trucking the compost somewhere for the treatment and then trucking it back to a farm, whereas we use all of our stuff on site. So yeah, every situation is different, but I currently have a student measuring my emissions, which is super cool and fun. We have a gas met analyzer on campus. So I have a student whose project is measuring what's going on, and kind of good is that the machine broke and we got to see the gas emitted when it wasn't working properly.
Wow, very interesting.
So, yes, there was some methane that day, but yeah, it's very interesting. We're in she's measuring every week at this stage. So there's lots of interesting educational outcomes that come from being able to do this. on site. So that first slide is showing the rocket, the ISF rocket. This is a machine that was imported from the UK at great expense and difficulty, and just getting it into the country once it was in the country was all sorts of problems. But it's quite common apparently in the UK to have this sort of system. It's basically a large container. It has sensors, so we can tell the temperature as compost moves through. But it's literally just a container with a rotor that moves the compost and waste through. So Michelle, if we can go to the next slide.
Are you able to see the next slide?
I can't do it.
On the first slide.
Yeah, it's still on the first at this point.
Okay.
That's it.
There we go. So the next one, we've just recently got a baby rocket. We now have the mother rocket and the baby rocket. The original rocket we've had since 2012. So there was an investment in sustainability. Then, all the things it takes, a principles commitment to put the money where the mouth is and actually make that difference a long time ago. And we have collected data on this ever since, is the other point. That is, we know how many kilograms of food waste were treated and then put in, and then how much exit compost. So we have got all that data over the years. I mean, there have always been ebbs and flows, but generally we've got data to see what's happened. So we now have a A700 is the new one, the baby, and then we've got the A900, which has a larger capacity. You can see the capacity is more than double. And that the large one's the one we've had going for the last 10 years here at ISF. If we can go to the next slide. So this is what it looks like. We have the waste, canteen waste is scraped into buckets. Primary students do their own scraping, and then with secondary, that's the disaster in the middle there is what happens. But the food scraps are scraped into the bucket on the right, the red bucket. And then those food scraps are taken down and put into the rocket. We don't have any preparation food scraps or very little. There's some from salad bar or sandwiches, but generally the food is on campus. It comes on pre-prepared, so its peels are done off-site. So we're no longer getting those things. We were at the beginning getting those kind of peels in the kitchen prep side. Currently, it's all food waste. So it is mixed. There's rice, there's vegetables, there's meat, there's sauces. It's all mixed canteen food waste. The third on the third side there is, sorry, just one thing before we go to the next slide. We do also work on reducing the amount of food waste by handing out a more controlled amount. So apparently, I've been here 3 years. Apparently, there was a lot more rice. We had a smaller student population, and the waste amount has gone down over the last 3 years, where now students, when they're ordering, can choose a smaller portion of carbs, because we were finding that the rice and the noodles were just completely thrown out. And that was really huge, just buckets and buckets of this. And I've had staff report to me, they've noticed that difference in the last 2 years to 12 months. And yeah, we've had a reduction in the total amount of food waste that we collect. So we weigh everything in the buckets before it goes into the treatment. And that's with the student population increasing. So we've held, so they've been on I'll get to the scary figures later. Okay, next slide. So the food waste buckets are lined up. We get about 10 a day. We have 2,000 students on site and staff. And then the food waste is put through a dehydrator machine. And this is a really important step. So Gordon's just putting that in there in the middle slide. It washes through with water, and then there's a macerator under that door. You can't see it because it's made safe, but he sorts the food so that large amounts of starch aren't going through together. So he mixes as he runs it through and then rinses it through with water. So it's a water heavy process. But what this dehydrator machine does is it turns the food waste into I call it like a fried rice, but it's macerated and it's dried, and the volume of food waste is reduced by 3/4. So we have 10 buckets go in and about 3 are coming out. So we're making a big difference to the actual amount of waste. And yes, there's water going off. It also rinses off some of the salt, and some of the oil is taken off. But the mixture on the right is what we actually put into our rocket. So I know this from any other organic farming I've done at other schools, where if you can mix and chop your scraps down to a smaller size, you're increasing surface area. And that is why we have a very successful system, even though the oil and the meat and the bones and things have been crunched through. So it's quite a mixed, it's not your typical compost mix. It is certainly not just fruit and veg. Next slide, please. So this is how we mix it. So anyone who has done compost knows it's an important mix between your nitrogen and carbon. No, I got my elements wrong. So Gordon mixes by hand. We used to have a machine, but it was found to be not as effective. So we have paper, that's shredded paper. It's actually British passports that were not just the paper from British passports. It's very high quality cotton paper. It's super absorbent. And it was being used as bedding by our jockey club. And we were doing some experiments with them. And we have been using that for the last 7 or 8 years. We also are using some shredded cardboard, which again is animal bedding, so it's not toxic. And then the brown bucket at the bottom is our exit compost that has been filtered. It actually comes out looking like soil, and I have a sample that I can show you in a minute. So we filter out the bulking agents. So those 3, the cardboard and the paper, are bulking agents to dry out and act as the carbon in our mix. Gordon puts them all into a bigger bucket and mixes it by hand. So on the right, he's adding the food waste that's been dehydrated. And then if we go to the next slide.
Yep.
Thank you. So he physically munches and crunches it through by hand. He rubs. It's like rubbing butter through flour if you've ever made a scone. So it's very, very well mixed. We do not have big balls of that food waste mixture. Even though it's been ground up, it can very easily stick together because of the high starch amounts in our Hong Kong food. And then that is added into our rocket, which is what Gordon's doing in the middle. He's also, and in that slide, he was actually adding some fresh fruit and veggie scraps. So we have staff bring in their scraps, and looking down, you can see the mixture looks like that. So in this case, if this is setting up the baby rocket, we were putting in exit compost. Normally, I don't get that. It goes straight into our organic gardens. So that's the dark brown. And then the white paper, there's brown, and then there's the vegetable and fruit scraps. So that's what the machine will do, is just literally turn that every couple of hours and just gently aerate. And because it's got the exit compost, it's like a starter of a yogurt starter, and those microbes then get into the digestion. If we go to the next one, I can just show the controls. Simply a motor to turn and a heater that will come on if the mixture is too cold. So it has sensors. If we can get over 60 degrees, we know that we are destroying pathogens, we're destroying weed seeds, and it is coming out organic certified. We also know that our germination index is 100%. So we test it periodically also. We go through full compost testing. We send it away. But the exit compost that comes out, which is in that red bin on the right, it's dry. And I have a bag I'll show once I finish the slides. And then the fine dust that comes through, I call it like the black gold. It's just the most rich, wonderful humus-like compost, and it takes 14 days. Just to show you, above that is the artwork on the right side picture. That's actually a ceramic artwork that a student did as a project describing what happens to a banana skin and how the temperatures change, and it comes out to feed the garden. So this project's been going for a long time, and it's been used in a lot of ways by different students. The next slide is the quick summary of aerobic versus anaerobic. I'm going to skip that, but it's there in case people did want reference. And yeah, the discussion I have with other schools when I'm talking to my colleagues is how to find a decent bulking agent. We tried wood shavings and wood chips. They haven't been very successful here at ISF. The passports have been wonderful, but we can't find them anymore. Apparently the British passport's gone online or something. I don't really know, but I haven't been getting any luck out of the consulate. But we're now switched to egg cartons, which we use a lot of eggs here. And that's also a nice malleable cardboard that can literally be shredded by hand, and it gives good kind of space in the mix. So that is our next experiment. We have actually, I haven't got on there, the coconut. We have been experimenting with coconut husk fibre. I'm not convinced that it hasn't caused the problems I've been having. It does tend to be quite strong, but our machine was very old, so we don't know if it was the motor getting old or the coconut was too strong. But yeah, having the bulking agent to match with your food waste is the important thing, because it's 3 to 1. So, you know, you can't just throw your food waste in and expect this to work. Next slide. So our figures, we were around 20 tonnes. We're now around 19,000, even though our population increased. But once we process it, we get about 6,000 kilograms of food waste a year. And then, yeah, we're fairly happy with the fact that we can't really restrict what we're handing out. We have a food donation for food that hasn't been presented, like if it's been kept in the back of house in the kitchen, that can be donated in Hong Kong. But staff tend to eat most of the food. There's very little food waste that's been kind of presented in the bain-maries. And then from that 4,000 of that product, so we use 2/3 of it, it produces about 3,000 compost, which goes directly to our gardens on our rooftop and grows vegetables. I don't have any even for my biodiversity garden. We use it all and it produces the most beautiful harvest. So it's 100% used on site. So we have a very lovely, wonderful system when it works, and it does generally work. Next slide. So just sort of saying, it started in 2012, was begun, and we have moved through different bulking agents as we've gone, done partnerships with other the Jockey Club particularly, and we also have coffee donations from other providers. So we also put the coffee from the cafe in there. So I would just, you know, it's a constant battle. With a 10 to 15-year-old machine, it just got rewound. So we've just got a new motor for it. But the things that we have, next slide, that have made this possible was the original investment and commitment to sustainability. But what we've ended up with this system, the reason it works is because of the resourcing in the middle, is having a staff member who comes for 3 to 5 hours a day. I know in other schools when they've had someone leave, their composting has stopped. So that is something, that commitment to human resources is, I think, the biggest thing. We use it across the school, so we justify it as a curriculum. Students tour there. My preschoolers come and put their scraps in the rocket, all the way to the secondary students doing projects, growing microbes, analysing the gas. We use it across the school. But yeah, it requires that commitment from leadership to have something like this on site. It hasn't been very successful. Tidy Planet has now stopped operation, and the people importing to Hong Kong could not get this through. So the other types with the incineration are much more proving much more popular here, but there's a lot of issues with using that product. I know from various contacts that I've got. So lastly, my email's there if anybody wants further contact on the last slide. It's kaul@isf.edu.hk. And Michelle, if you just switch to my camera, I'll just show what it looks like. I can't see myself for some reason today. I don't know what I'm looking at. But can you see? So this is the bulking agent at the top. There's some coconut and paper in there, and then the fine dust is what's come out after 14 days. So it's a pretty amazing system. You don't have to wait months for anything else. We put that straight into the gardens, and I can't get enough, basically, because we have a lot of gardens on our roofs. So that's what we do here at ISF.
Awesome, Kylie. Thank you so much for that. Please stay with us. We're going to go straight into the second speaker, and then if I'm sure you all have questions, and we'll take questions at the end of the third speaker. So the next speaker is Nick Little from the Waste Lab in Dubai. And maybe I realized that we had a bit of a challenge with displaying the slides on the full screen in the Zoom window. So let's see if we can just take a minute to sort that out. Nick, are you able to share slides from your end, or is Michelle?
I'm going to give it a go. Looks okay. Does that look okay now?
Yes.
Yeah, it's still showing up.
Yes,
Oh, there we go.
that's better.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Wonderful. Glad.
All right.
Right. Thank you,
Nick, over
guys.
to you.
Just go next and see if it still shows up, because that was an issue for me.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
That changed?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Good news. Thank you, guys. And thank you also, Kylie. You've probably done half of my job as well, explaining a lot of the composting processes, so that's great. What I do want to kind of kickstart off with is that I'm going to be talking about quite different methodologies to Kylie, and I'm going to be talking about some pros and cons of those. And it's not to say one methodology is any better than any other. Ultimately, we're all trying to tackle food waste in context-specific ways. And so just our methodologies are slightly different. And so to every school has their own resourcing, their own challenges, etc. So yeah, just trying to display a few different ways that people try to divert our food waste one way or another. So yeah, I'm Nick from the Waste Lab. We have a few key missions at the Waste Lab because yes, we are all about trying to make sure that we're rescuing food scraps. That's what we talk about when we say we are making sure that those food scraps are not going to waste. So whether that's leftovers, prep, etc., making sure that that food is not going to landfill. That is the number one thing that we're trying to achieve. But the second part is obviously what we do with that. And that's why we talk about building soil, because we are going to focus on composting. We focus on aerobic composting, which we'll go to in a bit more detail. But the whole point is then that we can get the nutrition from those foods back into our soils. So we are based here in Dubai. We work with schools across the UAE. And again, things like webinars and chats and things, we're trying to talk to people wherever we can and spread the message as much as possible. And this is what it's all about. Again, it's about thinking about all the nutrition that is in that image on the left-hand side. And it isn't just the reason why you see our kind of logo as well, that line through the word waste, is we're trying to reframe the way people think about these food items. Yes, food may not be eaten for a huge variety of reasons. And even if it's your trimmings or your peels or inedible things, fine. Or whether it's plate waste, whatever it may be. But just that word waste that constantly comes up, we try to reframe it as a resource, because we know then that all of the nutrition that is in that food, once we get it into the compost, we can feed our soils with it. Okay, so that again is kind of what we're all about. It's about that reframing of what we're trying to achieve. Now, why compost? Obviously, we'll have some experts here and lots of people know lots about composting, but really there's a few key reasons. The first, as we mentioned a few times, is just diverting from landfill. That's a huge win straight away. And Anthony showed as well about the diversion metrics, which is wonderful. But one often kind of understated metric and often not included one is kind of the replacement factor. So when you can use compost added to soils, your need for fertilizers drops, particularly if you're going completely organic or just using compost, etc. So then you don't need to produce those fertilizers, you don't need to import those fertilizers. And so there are all those associated emissions which also don't come into play. But then when we're talking about a living natural compost, we're talking about the ecosystem within it, which means we don't need to rely so much on pesticides, herbicides, things like that. It helps the immune system of the plants. So it really is a holistic thing as well. So it helps us build up that healthy soil, because it isn't just the nutrition from the food, but the way that we're creating this compost means that we're adding a living ecosystem to the soil as well. Something that is particularly prevalent for us here in the UAE, but across many places around the world, unfortunately, more and more, is that water just is not as prevalent as we would like it to be. So adding compost to our soils can help to act like a sponge. So it means it decreases the amount of water that you need, increases the water holding capacity of the soils, means that the water is there when the plants need it. You don't need to water as much or as often. And ultimately, again, what we're trying to achieve is we're trying to use this compost to grow more food. So it's about that cyclical nature of things. So we can actually take what is deemed as waste, convert it into a resource which can help build our soils, grow into food, and so on and so forth. So there's a couple of different ways in which we do this as a business. Because we are a business, we work with lots of schools, but we work with lots of different entities, events, restaurants, hotels, you name it. Food is everywhere, so we are trying to be everywhere. In the majority of cases, we do offsite composting. Now, what that means is for the majority of our clients, they don't have the space or the capacity or frankly the willingness to do their own composting, and that's fine. So we work with them to understand what they've got, we collect that from them, and then we compost it on their behalf. I'll show you a couple of images of our farmland in a moment. But that's a big part of what we do, is the offsite composting, doing it for you. The other part, and this is much more prevalent in schools, is where we're coaching people to do the on-site composting themselves. And again, a big part of that, and it's a huge part of my job, is the education alongside it. What we don't want to do is we don't want to be in a position where we are holding your hand forever and we're constantly coming back because, again, we're a business that's going to cost money. The whole point is that we can set you up with a system, teach you how to do it. You then filter that education throughout your school and it continues on without us in perpetuity. So just kind of briefly, I won't go into too much detail, but our offsite composting, as I say, we use hot aerobic composting. So it means once we collect the food scraps from our partners, we always have to check for contamination. We're responsible for the compost, so we want to make sure that it is as high quality as possible. So there's always that decontamination process. That is also where everything is weighed. So that what we can do then is we can give our partners their data. We can tell them about their diversion metrics. We can tell them about their emissions preventions and the equivalencies of those. I've got a case study coming up for you in a moment about that. Again, just like Kylie said, we're mixing those greens and those browns to have a balance of different nutrients. And essentially, we're creating our piles and leaving them alone. We are letting nature do the composting for us. Now, this is a longer process than the rocket we just spoke about, but it's also a less intensive operational process. All we're doing is we're checking the temperature because that increase in temperature tells us about the activity, the microbial activity of the compost pile and how quickly things will be breaking down. We're checking the moisture just to make sure, again, that those living things have the moisture that they need. So occasionally we'll need to water it. Again, checking it in different spaces and then mixing it to make sure that we have a pretty even blend throughout those piles. And that's kind of it, essentially. Again, things will vary, but on average, it kind of takes around 2 months to create our compost from our food scraps. Now I'll show you our farmland. So you can see a few different pictures there, a couple of different contexts. You can see when the weather gets particularly hot, we tend to cover them over. That helps trap some of the moisture within the piles, so we're not just evaporating everything off. That yellow turner, it's a bit of a strange vehicle. That essentially goes over the top of our compost piles, and that just turns them. It's just a drum that just mixes them together. Again, similar to that rocket system, it's just making sure there's oxygenation of what's happening within. And again, lots of those piles, you can see the straw, you can see wood chips and things laid over the top. Again, for one, it acts as a bit of a blanket to help keep moisture in, and it is obviously also a source of that carbon that we need. So that is our kind of on-farm composting. That's when we're doing it in an off-site perspective. And I mentioned the impact reporting that we do. So this is one school that we've worked with for a couple of years now. Now, this school, again, for whatever reason, they're not interested in doing things on site for themselves. They're just happy to hand over to us. Not a problem. We're all about creating impact where we can, so being flexible where we need to be. So this is what works for this school. Great, we're happy to do so. Now, this is a typical impact report. So you can see there all of the data that's collected. So you can see the vast majority of what we get from the school is food leftovers. Okay, there's a limited amount of preparation done on site. So it's that plate waste that students are scraping off. Again, honestly, there's not a lot of edible food that's left over, because similar to Kylie School, lots of the staff tend to eat that. So great, that's what we ultimately want. But there is always, unfortunately, some plate waste. So that gets collected. And again, you can see there the impact of what that's been. So over the last almost 3 years now, you can see almost 30 tons of food has not gone to landfill because we've been working together to collect it. That's over 30 tons of CO2 emissions that have been prevented. And then we're showing the equivalencies there, including the estimated compost amount. Now, again, one thing that we're really passionate about is giving that compost back, showing people that the end result is something. That when you're diverting your food waste, it isn't just another place where it goes and disappears. There's actually a journey behind that. So we do a lot of work on this impact reporting, storytelling, and giving that compost back means they have a resource that they can use in their landscaping, use it in science, use it in kind of even family giveaways, whatever it may be, the choice is theirs, but it's about showing that this is the end result of having not thrown that food away. So I'd say that is kind of the offsite option. But what we do with a growing number of schools, and this is honestly my preferred option, and actually, before I get into this, we do actually work with schools where there's a hybrid option. So actually, they do some on-site composting themselves, and we coach them through that. But then for lots of their things, we take it off-site as well. Okay, but this is around doing the on-site is more than just the composting itself. It's about the education that we're trying to provide. So again, we're using the same methodology of hot aerobic composting using piles, and we're building these up in low-tech, simple ways so that they are accessible by children. And again, super easy to learn. We tend to work with a core group of students, let's say an eco club, or maybe there's a particular year group who are focusing on something. We go in, we teach them over a series of a few months, the whole process of how to compost. So we'll go in on day one and we'll build up a pile with them, do a little bit of theory in the classroom, and then go outside. We'll provide these compost chambers that you can see. They are essentially recycled plastic box, open base, so it sits directly onto soil, sand, grass, whatever it may be. We just want some natural connection with the ground. And then we work with them to build up that first pile so that they understand we need the food scraps, but we also need those browns. We need to lay them out in different ways and so on and so forth. So they get to understand best practice. Ultimately, we hold their hand through that first day. This is what best practice looks like. This is how you do it. And we give them a little bit of that theory as to why we do it this way. Then after that first workshop, we give them all the tools and equipment and things. We provide things like guideline sheets so they can actually track the moisture, track the temperature. So they build up a bit of a picture of what's going on as well. So that by the time we come back for the next workshop in 2 or 3 weeks' time, we can just find out what's happened. They can tell us their experiences. And you know what? If it's been really, really dry for whatever reason, okay, fine. Now we can troubleshoot that. We can work it out. If it has started to smell, okay, that's because maybe we didn't do this correctly or whatever it may be. That whole point of that second session is so that we can help troubleshoot together. We give them a bit more theory and coach them through that process a little bit more when they've had some experience, when they have some understanding themselves. Then again, what we do is we leave them alone for a little bit longer, probably come back in a month or 2 after that, when hopefully by this stage, some compost has been created. we've given it a couple of months, things have broken down effectively. That's then where we go in and help them to harvest the compost, help them to use the compost, look around the school campus, where can it be used, how can it be effectively embedded within what's going on already around campus. So a really great example of this is Jebel Ali School. If there's anyone from Jebel Ali School, you guys are doing a great job. We worked with them a while ago, and essentially we set them up with this compost station. As I said, we've gone in with some education, we worked with the Eco Council, and then we stepped away. After that series of workshops, we've stepped away. We're always there if they need any tips or guidance, but the point is those students have spread the message to other students. And it's now a much broader program because other students have been brought in. They've started to use the compost in some gardening around school. They've started to grow tomatoes. They've started to grow aubergines, a few other different things right next to the compost garden. So they can see then that whole cyclical pattern that we're trying to achieve. That food is being grown, any leftovers from the kitchen can go back into the compost, and so on. So they really understood the whole process of what they're trying to achieve. And that's the aim of why we do this on-site composting. Yes, absolutely, we want to make sure that food is not going to waste, but more than that, we want students to understand the impact of the diversion, making sure that A, it isn't going to waste full stop, but B, what can come out of it at the end. So they're the kind of key differences. I mentioned some schools will do a hybrid modality. Reason really for the hybrid modality is some huge schools, I mean, in many places we have lots of leftovers which are maybe meat heavy or oil heavy, things like that. And that's difficult to break down in an aerobic compost chamber like this. So what we can do is we can have that split modality whereby we take away the harder to compost items. So we can do that on their behalf. And we keep those really simple, the food scraps, the fruit peels, veg trimmings, things like that on site for the students to actually get that experience and have it a little more effective rather than them having hard to compost items. Maybe the experience isn't quite there. They then get upset with it or it doesn't work quite as well as they want to or whatever. So while those things could be composted on site, by keeping it a little bit easier, it means then that it's kind of going to be more self-fulfilling in the future and easier for that expertise to be passed on to the next year group, the next year group, and so on.
Nick, we've
Yeah.
just got a couple more minutes left, if that's all right, and then we'll pass on to Howard in order to keep to time.
No worries, that's fine. I was going to finish up there. Yeah, as I say, that's kind of the key thing is working with small groups of students for the effective kind of education, but having that broader message out to the rest of the school so that you eventually get the buy-in from everybody, including parents or families as well, if they want to bring in their own food scraps, this kind of thing. It's about that kind of whole messaging as well as the education itself. So yeah, I'm going to pause there. Thank you, everyone. I'll put up my contact details there briefly. But yeah, I'll hang around for questions as well at the end. So thank you.
Super. Nick, thank you very much. That was wonderful. We will have time for questions at the end of Howard's presentation, but Howard's up next. So over to you, Howard.
Okay. All right. Let me just have a super quick look and see if I can get something on the boil here. I'm going to try and show you a video. Do you fancy that?
Excellent.
Yeah.
Please do.
Okay. So it's going to go into a video of the Waste to Wonder project, and I thought a sort of nice way to show you this is just to give you the actual video that we packaged up to give you a kind of overview of what that project was. So if you bear with me, hopefully we'll get some audio. Okay, there you go. So that's just the sort of packaged up overview of our Waste to Wonder project, really. I thought I'd give you a quick view into that. And in a sense, it's not too different. It's not too different from what you'd expect to be going on. It was a collaboration between a garden project, which was student run, and also this idea of let's do some composting on the side because we had this incredible asset, which is the food waste that we produce each day. And I think that amounts to about 100 kilograms. So we started this about 5 years ago. And like I say, we packaged up these two projects, a colleague and I took care of the garden, he took care of the compost. We packaged these up together. And the judges really like this approach. I guess not just because it's a garden and compost, but because it brought together community. And we even created one new job out of it. So we've got the Friends of Dulwich, which is a parent group, some IEs, which is the sort of auxiliary support staff in school. And they're really interested in the progress of the garden and growing because they get the output of it. All the fruits and vegetables go to the IEs when it's ready, and that's a process that they're really interested in. There's quite a few staff that have been involved as well, parents, and of course, we've had probably more than 100 kids over the years involved in that garden project as well. So that's Waste to Wonder. We started with what you're looking at on screen now, which was a sort of failed garden project, really, on a sloping site. Somebody decided to try and use raised
Howard,
beds.
sorry,
Yeah.
I think we can see your slides. It's the last frame of the video.
Oh, okay. Let me just have a quick look. Let me see. Okay, how does that look? Does
That's
that look
it.
okay?
That's better.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Great. Okie doke. So there we go. There's our starting point. That's our garden going back 5 years. And very quickly, we went through some different methods of composting. So we were gifted a fancy German composter, and we hit some very typical problems with that. Limited capacity, took maybe 8 weeks to compost, and became anaerobic, fetid, and stinky very, very quickly. Method two, we moved on to, which was just throw it directly into the earth. I didn't get anyone's permission for that. I read that was possible on YouTube and gave it a go. I never sought permission for that because I thought it would be an immediate no, because there's some issues tied to that with regards to attracting vermin. Now, we never had a problem with that, and it worked beautifully, actually. And I still do that from time to time when our machine breaks down, and I'm looking for a solution. So that was sort of solution two to our food waste. But again, we moved on to something a bit more useful, and this is our equivalent of the rocket. This can take up to about 25 kilos per day, and we get, as sort of mentioned before, some absolutely beautiful compost from it. And then, as I sort of hinted at, that compost goes straight into the garden. But at certain points of the year, when there's no gardening happening, winter, for example, we get too much compost. And so the question is then, well, what do you do with it? At this point, my slides are a little bit disconnected because I'm now showing you something which looks a bit odd. Now, this is basically my colleague and I trying to sell the dream, sell the idea and get more staff engagement, if you like. And so this is a play that we put on. We created a garden on stage with some absolutely beautiful AI backdrops, huge backdrops. And then we sort of did this skit between us without acknowledging the audience as kind of a playful way to get people's interest and let them know that this project was kind of going on. Anyway, back to it. So what do we do with all the compost? This was something that I was prompted to mention, so it's perhaps something of interest. But if you only ever use the compost for going into your school garden, then the sort of interest from that can be somewhat limited. And perhaps you've got too much compost anyway. So we found an alternative path for this. We created a club called the Social Enterprise Club, SEC. and it's had absolutely fantastic success. It's essentially a business format club, where students have to come up with an idea of something to sell that may or may not incorporate the compost. We've had a couple of items not incorporating it, but we've had great success with compost items. So one of them selling Christmas trees that use our compost. And then another item is actually just selling the compost itself under our own trademarked brand called Botanique. And that again generates an awful lot of interest. And you'd be surprised how much of a markup you can put on that compost if you can package it nicely and market it. And of course, that's part of the social enterprise club. And I guess the other thing that connects to that is, yeah, you could give it away to the community as well, generate some community partnerships. I think that would be of interest. But we had some success in what happens next. So we made some profit, we used that money, and then we decided to allow the students to get onto a platform called Kiva, which is it's essentially a platform that partners people who are willing to lend money to people who wish to be to receive money at low interest or even no interest. So we actually went into the business of lending out money, and we've got a growing portfolio now of people all over the world, often farmers, often female representatives who are maybe in the farming business or want to get into that business, maybe wish to expand, something like that. But people who our students have deemed to have a kind of legitimate and interesting claim and worthy of support. So that has been another way to really connect this composting project, or really use the money as an offshoot of that composting project. And that really, in a kind of fast-paced way, is what I wanted to give you. Just to loop back full circle, I guess what the judges liked about this project overall is that there was a transformative aspect from before to after. Hopefully you can see that. But it's a project that changes over time. So every year you get a new intake, a fresh intake of people that get on board. But also the garden changes its form and shape over time. And so it was deemed to be of particular interest. And it's something that we use and incorporate into kind of wider school learning as well. I quite often do the odd gardening tour for primary and sometimes secondary as well. So that journey of composting from our kind of early first fetid anaerobic mess to where we are now has been a really it's been a good journey. It's been very interesting for me. I never imagined there was so much to learn regarding how to get your composting right and how to get a good mix, but also importantly, how to make use of what is essentially a useful resource that just goes to waste. And sometimes to be able to even monetize that and set that up in a way that students can get on board in a kind of business context. So that's it. I'll sign off for today. I hope you found that somewhat interesting or useful. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Howard. Please stay on if you can for another 10 minutes or so while we take questions from others that are still online. Thank you very much. One of the things I love about your project is how collaborative it is across the different departments of the school, and also the peer-to-peer lending piece that you spoke about at the end. From what I recall, many of the recipients of those loans were small business owners in the global south. So it brings an interesting environment and social justice piece into the use of one of the uses of food waste. So thank you for that. We're going to now open up to questions from the audience and for any of the speakers. So raise your hand and I'll invite you to ask a question, or you can also post a question in the chat if you prefer.
We have a few questions in the chat box
We
for Nick.
go ahead, Michelle.
From Hunia, what material did you use for the on-site compost plant or the box that we can see? I think that's for you, Nick.
Yeah, so in those images, typically with schools we use recycled plastic. It's not ideal for a couple of reasons, but in terms of the effectiveness, it's actually what we found is best. So if you're using wood, for example, it is obviously organic, so over time it breaks down, it may need to be replaced. That's fine if you're willing and able to replace it. If you're using metals, it can get extremely hot, and also there can be contamination. So yeah, essentially, while plastic is not our preferred material in general, actually it's kind of the best thing for this job, for this kind of very hot environment as well. Yeah.
Thank you. There's another question for you, Nick, from don't have her first name, Diana Dunn. She says, I see there's a reduction in waste collected from 2024 to 2025, offsite composting, in one of the schools that you've been associated with since 2023. Is that reduction in food waste generated due to some campaign awareness program done along with the waste collection initiative? And could you also please let us know if there's an analysis that you do on the compost generated and if there's any contamination in the compost that you've observed? So a couple questions in there, but
Yeah, a couple of different things. So yeah, just briefly on the diversion rates going down for the school. We often see that in a few of our clients because invariably people don't know how much they are wasting until we collect it and then we measure it and we tell them, right? So that often happens that we do see a reduction. So I think off the top of my head is about a 12% reduction year on year, which is obviously great. There is still a way to go, but it's just that awareness that is the very first thing that helps drive that reduction, which is always what we want. As I said, we'd rather see that figure drop because food is being eaten. That's ultimately the main thing. So yeah, definitely there. Then in terms of the analysis of the compost, yeah, absolutely. We are always checking that. We actually work with some universities for particular research projects. We do our own in-house testing. We work with labs, trying to make sure what the nutrient profiles are, checking pH, testing if there's any contamination in terms of heavy metals, etc. Generally, the contamination rate is very, very low because of our step process. Because we collect everything, bring it to our control station, and then we have a screening, our contamination rate is very, very low for that reason. But obviously, in certain circumstances, the foods themselves might be contaminated with, again, contamination might be pesticides or things like this as well. Ideally, we don't want those coming into our supply, but we can't exclude those at that initial point. So again, kind of similar to what Kylie said, those high temperatures, they really help us break lots of things down as well to, again, ensure a higher quality output.
thank you for that. There's a question for Howard. How many times are your students composting in a week? Is there a kind of schedule that the students follow?
Oh, yeah, okay. How many times are we composting a week? Well, we're not, I don't know, just how many times? Every day. So basically, the food waste from just goes from cafeteria into compost machine. That's it. 24 hours later, that's it. The compost is ready to go. We tend to leave it in there until it accumulates. You get an incredible sort of die down, so to speak. So I think somebody said something like 75% reduction in mass. I think it's even more than that. But having said that, we only input into the machine raw vegetable input. Okay, so it almost vanishes. So we compost every day, and then there's, I don't know, sometimes weeks and weeks and weeks before that compost goes onto the garden or gets packaged up to sell. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, the chat box is pretty active. Another question for Nick. Is the daily collection of food waste at the school coordinated by the school, staff representative, student volunteers, or from the waste lab? Just curious to know how that system works.
Generally, that's through school management. As I say, we are a business, so it is a chargeable service. So that is generally through management. But having said that, we often get connected to schools through students or through parents or that kind of area. So we might be connected in a different way, and then the actual coordination goes a little bit later. That's kind of on the collections when we're doing things offsite. In terms of onsite, we have had direct contact with kind of the students and stuff as well. Again, trying to get a bit more ownership as well. We'll always share our contact details when we're working with the school. So we've had kind of posters sent our way, we've had videos sent our way. Is this conveying the right message to the rest of the students and things like that? So yeah, I mentioned at the top, we're very impact driven and we're very flexible around that. So however we can get to that impact point, we're happy to do so.
Thank you. Does anyone else have?
I was just going to make a comment. A key stakeholder that isn't represented, as far as I know, on this call are the food caterers in schools, and getting their buy-in and cooperation with the whole food waste processing in canteens is critical, and we've had pretty good experiences with the caterers that we've worked with on this subject in the past, but many of the caterers have their own food waste management processes in the back of house if they're preparing food in-house, but they often overlook what's going on in the canteen itself. So in our experience, if schools haven't put this in place, the food waste in the front of house, the plate scrapings, are still going in the general waste. And we know that it's probably twice as much food waste from that source compared to the food waste that's generated in kitchens in the back of house. So it's important to collaborate with the caterers.
Our students actually came up with the low carb, medium carb, more carb options. So that was actually a student-led thing, and they've done a lot from the, as Anthony, as you know, from the carbon canteen and cafe. And actually, one of the key strategies we've impacted is again, our caterer is really responsive, but increasing the plant foods. So we always have 1 out of 3 option is vegetarian. We have a lot of options. I know that's maybe not, I don't know, different, but 1 vegetarian every day. And I'm working with them to just reduce the amount of red meat on the menu just because of the impact, wider impact on those ways. But yeah, our students are often coming up with ways to reduce waste in this space, almost running out of spaces no, there's always somewhere to go, always something to impact, but yeah, often it comes from them.
Thank you, Kylie. Amanda, you have a question?
Yes, I
Please
do. Our caterers are at the moment the only food waste we're composting. We have about 8 large composting bays. We use black soldier fly larvae doing most of the composting. Is from the back of the kitchen, and it's in the production of the food on campus. So it's vegetable peelings predominantly, I would say, and fruit. We find the students don't really have a lot of food waste, and if they do, it's quite contaminated. They're not separating out. One thing we have done for next year, and I've got a problem to ask, is all our concessionaires, we have 7 of them, must only use compostable packaging. We're a BYO school. Students are expected to bring their own containers. We do have a grab and go. And as of next year, anything that is sold in a container, which a couple of things are, must be compostable. So our next step is to try and get that down there. Our biggest problem is, and I think someone else asked the question too, and I don't know if other schools are thinking of something that we haven't thought of yet, is the roster of getting it there. So we want students to take the food waste every day. At the moment, we have a roster where every child will take it once a year as part of their home base or their advisory. For example, middle school does Monday, Wednesday through the advisory program, a different grade level on a different day. Elementary school does a Tuesday, high school does a Thursday, and volunteers on a Friday. That's hard on a Friday. It's typically me and the same parent that's been doing it for 3 years and any student that's a compulsory volunteer. However, I'm just curious, what other systems and those people that are companies that are working with schools, what are those schools doing to get the food waste there? Like, are they using, adult personnel, or are students doing it? Do they have rosters in place? Ours has just been, we're constantly evolving it and shifting it. People forget, they don't go. It's just been an ongoing struggle for the last few years.
Just to clarify your question, are you asking about how to get with a system to get the food waste separated at the point of disposal, or to get it transported from where it's been separated to where it's being composted?
Transported. It's being separated. They're doing a really good job of that. All the cantina catering staff get it, and they do a great job of separating it. So we get anywhere from 20 to 80 kilos a day, and it goes in 2 yellow wheelie bins, and they've got to take a distance of about 300 meters. But it's just getting it there. Some divisions do a better job than others, and it's just, I don't know what other systems are schools using. Like, how are they rostering or getting their food waste down there so that every child is involved in it at some point?
Sounds like you've got a pretty workable system in place, that it's a roster of different people's responsibilities throughout the week. That seems a good way of sharing the load.
Sounds good in theory. Sounds good in theory until you go there and realize they didn't take it that day or the next day, or it's a long weekend and it didn't go, or but I don't know what other schools are doing.
Kylie's mentioned in her presentation that ISF have a part-time person, several hours a day, 5 days a week, whose sole job it is to oversee the handling of the food waste from the point at which it's already been separated by the students to the delivery into the food waste composter. But in their campus, the compost is only, a short, maybe it's one floor in the elevator, but it's not like hundreds of yards away from where the kitchen is.
Yeah,
so that helps, but it also helps to have a single person whose job responsibility is to do just that.
Yeah, and our worry is, like, there's been, a couple of us that have driven this program from the beginning. And when we go, and I heard someone say at the beginning, this system that we've got is reliant on a couple of people. So when those people leave, our worry is the system stops, right? We've built it, but it's not really sustainable to the point of when those people leave. Yeah. Anyway, if anyone have ideas or is doing something different, please let us know.
Just to jump in quickly, because we obviously work with a range of schools, and I think the point is that there is a range of options. As say, whenever we're doing any kind of training stuff, we always engage with the staff, also the operations staff, who are there 365 days a year, because obviously the students aren't. So in many cases, there will be that might be shared a load amongst the operations staff. Or they will just play kind of second fiddle to the students. And so we often work with an eco club or an extracurricular activity, whatever, where they actually take the ownership of it. So again, there's that duality of understand you're trying to get all children involved, and that is great. But then you may have some children who would want to do more, and then they're only getting an opportunity once or twice a year or whatever it may be. So there's probably a balance to be found, and your school better than anyone else. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. But I think, and I saw one of Howard's comments as well, is having some ownership for the students kind of gets them a bit more excited, a bit more engaged to do it. Generally, we found in most of the schools we work with, it's a kind of student ownership, the willingness from a key group of students, supported by some expertise or some support within the kind of staff, management, operations, whoever it may be.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe putting it to an after-school club that might oversee it is a good idea as a backup.
The never-ending.
Anyone else?
Yeah, that's the
Any-
longevity.
Go ahead, Kylie.
Sorry, just that is the never-ending question in every sustainability project we do, right? Is who actually does maintain it and what happens. Probably they'll hire someone when you go, Amanda. There'll be someone whose job it is just to do it because they'll realize you've been doing 4 jobs. Sorry, but that sometimes happens. They realize how important it is.
Sorry, that was a typo in my message. I just said it's just lovely to sit in a space this afternoon with so many like-minded people that are have a passion around sustainability and composting. So thank you. I've really enjoyed it.
Amanda, join TASS.
We have to. I know the time's
More
coming.
of the same.
Yeah, I know our time is coming.
I just wanted to comment also on your composting containers. You know, there are more and more composting containers available now. But a point that's worth noting is that first of all, not all composting containers are easily composted, and if they're only composted, the fact that they're compostable or labeled compostable doesn't mean that they will be composted. And some of them require a particular type of composting to actually degenerate into the same kind of compost that vegetable material or vegetable trimmings ends up as. So, you know, I've seen experiments done in the UK with different compostable containers being buried in soil and dug up, you know, 3 months later, and they're still only partially degraded. So, you know, I guess there are there's a spectrum of what's compostable, and what ends up being compostable depends on there being an ecosystem that's appropriate to actually treat them in a way that fully degrades them.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's a good point. We're going through a company called EcoNest here in the Philippines, and it's mostly made from maize, I believe, coffee. We did do exactly that. We buried several containers. They gave us samples and we took them up. They've got very big concrete composting bays. They're huge. And we buried them to see what would happen. And they did disappear. So I was pleased.
Okay, well, that's
I was
encouraging.
very worried about that. So is it normal because they either need exposure to sunlight or it just takes a lot longer, or they will compost, but in a very specific environment?
All of the above. I think it depends on what the material is and what else has gone into the basic material in order to construct the container. So I think it certainly helps to have if you bury something away from sunlight and oxygen, it probably doesn't decompose as quickly if you. But right. So industrial composters like the one Kylie described, for example, is going to have a mix of other things besides the composting material, carbon, nitrogen balance, the oxygen, of course, and the heat that contribute to helping it degrade. So, like many labels, the term composting on a packaging isn't regulated, and so you can get a range of different interpretations of what that actually represents.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. We'll follow up with that. So thank you. Step in the right direction.
Yes, indeed.
All right.
Well, it's 5:45. We've gone over 15 minutes, but if there's any more questions, we'd be happy to field them. I assume that the speakers are still online, and if not, we will wrap up. So I'll just open the floor up to one or two final questions if anyone has them. Seems like everybody's good to go. And with that, we will wrap up. And please join me in thanking our speakers, Kylie, Nick, and Howard, for really interesting presentations and sharing their expertise. And thank you all for taking time in your afternoon or your morning to join us today. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all so much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you.